Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today we're going to take a look at Daniel Dennett's famous word, Deepity. Specifically, at the talk he gave in 2009, where he publicly defined it for the first time.
Well, I want to introduce a term of my own that I coined some years ago, and that's Deepities. Now, I didn't invent the word itself. The teenage daughter of a colleague of mine did.
This should not be an inauspicious beginning. Spoiler alert, it is.
So what's a deepity? I've taken it beyond just the term itself, and I've given it a definition. So a deepity is a proposition that seems to be profound because it's actually logically ill-formed. It has at least two readings and balances precariously between them. On one reading, it's true, but trivial. On the other reading, it's false, but would be earth-shaking if true.
This is a stipulated definition, so it's not proper to take issue with it. I should note, though, that there's already a name for this, which is the fallacy of equivocation. Technically, the fallacy of equivocation doesn't require the false side to be important. It's just that no one bothers with the fallacy of equivocation to convince people of a false and trivial meaning. Actually, I think a word about equivocation is in order, because in English, the word has both a technical meaning and a connotation through common usage. The technical meaning of equivocation is to use a word more than once in different senses. The opposite of using a word equivocally is to use it univocally, that is, in one sense throughout. The common meaning of equivocation has to do with deception, but this is, properly, only one use of equivocation. It is not the original meaning. It's one of those cases of a technical term happening to serve a tangential but more common use, and so becoming better known by what it wasn't really supposed to mean. Poetry and metaphor both make use of equivocation in the original sense, especially where the two meanings are related to each other. Theology makes heavy use of equivocation in the original sense because nothing positive can be univocally predicated of both God and man. All of our words which refer to created things refer to, created things, and therefore do not apply to God, except possibly by analogy. Some people deny even this, and say only negative things can be predicated of God, in which case you can't even say that God loves his creation. Obviously that's not a Catholic doctrine, but it exists outside of orthodoxy. Anyway, now that Dennett has defined a deepity, let's look at his example.
To help you get on with the term, I want to give you an example of a deepity. Are you ready? This is going to be pretty profound. Everybody's sitting. That's good. Yes. Love is just a word. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Love is just a word.
You don't need to know where he ends up to know, at this point, that it's not going to be good. The people who say, love is just a word, are making an assertion about the nature of reality. They aren't appealing to common human consensus. You can disagree with them, but the whole point of a term like deepity is to suggest that no one can properly think the statement profound.
Now let's just walk through it. Here's the first reading. Love is just a word. That's true. It's trivial. It's a word, it begins with an L, it's got 4 letters. It's comparable to cow is just a word, and cheeseburger is just a word, and so forth, for any word you like. So there's the true trivial reading of the sentence.
Yes, this is a true trivial reading of the sentence. It's not what anyone who says this phrase means by it, even equivocally, but it is a true and trivial reading of it.
Then here's the other one, which is, just take those quotation marks off. Love is just a word. Oh, really? Oh, my. First of all, it's false. I mean, whatever love is, it isn't a word. It may be an interpersonal relationship. It may be an emotion. It may be the most wonderful phenomenon in human psychology, or it may be an illusion. But it isn't a word. It is not a word.
The whole point that people who say this are trying to get across, and by the way, I'm not one of them, is that it's a mildly poetic way of saying that the word love is a symbol with no referent. Actually, there are at least two related meanings. The first non-trivial meaning is to deny that there is any referent in reality to which the word love points. Words are symbols, and as such point to something other than themselves. To say that a word is just a word is to say that it's a symbol which doesn't in fact point to anything, and therefore using it in a sentence results in a sentence with no real meaning. This is somewhat akin to what Dennett means by "it may be an illusion." This is, basically, a semi-poetic way of saying that love is an illusion, that it is nothing but self-interest dressed up out of shame or some such. This is false, in the same sense that "there is no God" is false, that is, it doesn't correspond to reality, but the people saying it think that it does. Defining a deepity only has any value if the false reading would be acknowledged to be false by the person speaking it. Otherwise, you could turn Dawkins' proof that there almost certainly is no God into a deepity. The true but trivial reading would be to read "there" as in a location, as in "there's no God over there." And since God is not located spatially, that's true but trivial. On the other hand, since God exists, the alternative reading, where God is taken to not exist, would be earth-shattering if true, but it's false. To take deepity to depend entirely on where one falls on controversial subjects is to turn most things people say into deepities according to those who disagree with them, rendering the word purely polemical. Using it would mean nothing beyond, "I don't agree with you." The other meaning of "love is just a word" is a prompt for action in response to a person saying, "I love you." In this case, they are again not being completely literal, but attempting to semi-poetically convey the meaning that merely saying, "I love you," is insufficient evidence of the truth of the statement, and for it to be believable, it must be accompanied by action, which proves it to be true. Since this is essentially just a statement of a person's belief in another's claim, it is almost certainly going to be true. It is exceedingly rare for a person to say, "prove it," to statements which they already believe without reservation. There are probably other semi-poetic meanings to the phrase, "love is just a word." I think that the fact that Dennett has picked for his second reading of the phrase a meaning which almost certainly no one in the whole history of the world has ever meant suffices to tell us what we need to know about him.
You can't find love in the dictionary. Right? That's almost a deepity.
It might rise to the level of a deepity, though more along the lines of what his friend's teenage daughter meant by the phrase, if anyone, anywhere, had ever thought that you could find love in the dictionary, even metaphorically. Interestingly, in the talk he doesn't proceed to use the word deepity, he instead gives many examples of where he clearly doesn't understand what somebody is saying, though he presents the misunderstanding of them as errors on their part. And this seems to generally be the problem with Daniel Dennett. He doesn't seem to know what anybody else means by what they say, and has concluded that the problem is entirely on everyone else's side. This, in fact, seems to be a theme among the New Atheist movement in general, sort of its version of Satan's famous "I will not serve." But in this case, it is their fellow men whom they will not serve. They will not stoop their neck even to hear what another man is saying. They will meet no man halfway. All communication must be on their terms, or not at all. The result is a tremendous disconnect, where they think themselves very clever for not understanding the rest of us, and we think them rather dim for not understanding us. But really, they're not so much dim as proud, or perhaps just lazy. Though now that I say that, I wonder if they're not just too scared of failure to try. It's a big world, and admitting that another man may have a meaning behind his words that seems to be nonsense, which we haven't understood, requires trust. Trust in God, really, but more proximally, trust that the universe is well governed even where we don't understand it. And the new atheists do seem to have trouble trusting. They can have blind faith, typically in some fictional version of science they've erected in their minds as an idol, but they can't trust, because trust is the action of a free man, and the only thing they find acceptable is mental slavery. They of course make it more palatable by calling it freedom, but then dictatorships often make themselves more palatable by calling themselves democracies, as does, for example, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Now, it is perhaps strange that I picked this relatively trivial example of Daniel Dennett with which to analyze him. Far more central to his thought is, so I've been told, some crazy theory about metaphorical word demons vying for control of our lips, and that being the origin of our mistaken belief in free will. More amusing is his recent turn towards compatibilism and warning his fellow determinists that it's best to lie to people and tell them that they have free will, because people who don't believe they have free will make far less moral choices. But these subjects are at once bigger and smaller. Bigger, because they require far more background and detail. Smaller, because they're just obviously wrong. Deepities, I think, make a fairer look into the man, because if a man can't get small things right, how can he be expected to get big things right? Or as St. Irenaeus put it in Against the Heresies, citing a common saying of his time, one does not need to drink the entire sea to know that it is salt. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.